relatives of Ora Bryans. The thing that's amazing about the tintypes is that they were sort of like Polaroids, in that you would go into a studio, and often the studio would provide you with props and stuff like that. And of course, this building here was the offices of the camps.
Right, my father worked from that.
Okay.
Yep, and they used to cook over here and take it down the lake, the pond, in boats. Because there was no roads going back there.
Right.
Yep.
Wow, that's cool.
Ben Moulton.
Yep.
And she wrote a number of things. You know, she lived right at the corner here.
Oh yeah, yeah. She, I took Latin from her.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, didn't do well.
This is Centennial Hall, and so named because it was built in 1876. And we're not sure exactly who built it, but its first function was both as a clothing factory, and we didn't realize this until relatively recently, and a meeting hall upstairs for the Knights of the Maccabees. Knights of the Maccabees were a fraternal organization in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They did some amazing stuff. They were one of the first things that they did was they provided life insurance for their members. So if one of the members died, the rest of the members would kitty up and get some money together and give that to the widow. And then after a while, they realized that, well, we could sort of get the money ahead of time and put it in a bank and get some interest on it, and then it would be a little more predictable and so forth. And so they actually provided the first form of life insurance for their members, and they continued to do that for a long time. A lot of the fraternal organizations sort of faded out in the 1930s, including although they continued on into the 40s, but they eventually sort of morphed into a life insurance company, and no longer a fraternal organization, but a life insurance company. And it was only recently that we discovered from this map that describes this building as being Potter and Ordway's clothing factory. And we checked in the census and discovered that yes, indeed, there were some 20-odd women that their employment was as working in a clothing factory. And in fact, during that period, not only did Denmark have a clothing factory, so did Brownfield, so did Hiram, several other places. We don't have figures for the Denmark one, but the Hiram one, in 1 year, sent 20,000 overcoats to the Boston and New York markets. So they were pumping out some overcoats. And we don't really know, but I'm imagining that they were basically operating treadle sewing machines. I was imagining how they were doing that. So this building was, served those two functions for a while, and it was known as Centennial Hall. In fact, the lot that it's on is, in the deeds, known as the Centennial lot. There was, in the 1800s, there were actually as many as 15 small water-powered mills. This building was not, because it's not exactly on the stream, but there was a mill directly behind this building, and another one sort of catty-corner that way, and you can see there's old foundations further down the stream. And so this is one of the, sort of my pet interest has been the water-powered mills. These are some pictures of some of the mills. I'm not sure that we've identified all of them. This one is actually this is this building. This is the apartment building next to us. What's interesting about this is this shows, okay, the Centennial Hall that we're in is right off the corner here. So these buildings were going across the road there. One of the interesting things is this large tower, which was a water tower. and it was actually used in combination with the turbine that's across the road in the park there. And basically what they did was they diverted a small portion of the water flowing out of the pond and used a hydraulic ram, which passively, without putting any power input, pumps water up into a higher location, and including up into a tower like that. So, and what they would do is they would build water up, get up to a certain amount, and then they would release it all at once, and you would get much more power out of what otherwise wasn't very powerful water, because it didn't have the head, or the difference between, you know, the distance that it drops. So apparently it was successful for quite a while. We'd like to know more about that mill that was there. We've heard that it was a blacksmith shop, but that actually is far more power than a blacksmith shop would really need. That turbine across the way there is, depending on how much head it has, is rated minimum of 15 horsepower up to 35, 40, 50 horsepower, depending on how high that tower is. And you have to sort of figure out from the picture how high that might have been. So there may have been something else going on there, or maybe just a lot of, you know, maybe a bunch of different blacksmiths set up. So before we leave this area, these are some pictures of this building the way it was when I bought it. And you can see it's a little bit rough. As I was telling Andrew, there's actually a tree growing out of the foundation. But Bob Weiser's guys and Dana Watson, you know, stabilized it and then jacked it up so we could get a real foundation underneath it. This is a picture of this building back when it first had the post office in it. The post office was actually in that portion there. Those stairs were all new. It used to be the only way to get upstairs was small, narrow stairs that went up against that back wall there. So these are some of the other mills that are here. This is a great picture that we refer to often. This dates to 1906, and you can see the corn shop here, the Burnham Memorial Corn Shop, and a number of other places. You can see this building. You can see the other mills back down along the stream there. This is another picture of the corn shop. This is the crew of the corn shop, and you'll notice it's predominantly children and women, except for one guy right in the middle that's got a bowler hat. I suspect he's the manager of the operation. These are some more pictures of the ponds and mills. This thing is kind of interesting. This is a window sash, obviously. That's never been used. It's never had caulking in it here or anything. And this was found in the barn here. And if you kind of look at the different squares, you'll notice it's a little bit cockeyed. And if you look, it was just laid out wrong. So this is like somebody's first attempt to make a sash, and they blew it. So this came from the Potter and Ordway, what's labeled on that map as cabinet shop, but it's also known as a sash shop, and that's what they did. And so I just thought that was really neat. And this sign up here was actually found sort of hidden in the barn. Now, it could have been from either this building, or it could have been on the sash shop, which was in back, which they own both buildings and businesses, so we're not really sure which one it was. That one obviously could go right there, or could have gone on the other shop. And the water-powered mills in back, they do not have a specific relationship to Denmark, but the corn shop, although it did not need water power, it had its own box mill to make boxes to put the canned corn into. And they probably, I think we've seen indications that they also sold boxes in addition to that, and also sold shook. Shook is unassembled materials to make a box, cut to length of the proper size and so forth. And the term is also used for the materials to make a wooden barrel. And we know that there was at least one, probably two wooden barrel shops in town. And it's interesting that typically they didn't sell the completed barrels because they would take up less space if they were just collapsed together. So this is a four-side planer that is of the type that probably would have been in the sash shop behind. This can make all these different patterns here, and it could make window sash and other building moldings and so forth. This particular one, we know its history from the very beginning. It was in one of the mills in Bridgeton, and eventually ended up with Gordon Brill, who was a local sawyer and a really interesting fellow for a long time. And in fact, when I moved here in 1979 and I was building the barn and I wanted some decking for the barn, people said, well, you got to go to Gordon, he'll make some up for you. This is scrap from that project, and it was made on this machine. And this machine was still in operation by Gordon's son, Scott, until I bought it. It was demonstrated for me, and then we took it apart and brought it over here. So this is going to be put back together and shifted around this way. There's going to be an overhead line shaft that will run all of these machines. That's powered by an electric motor that's upstairs, but that's already up there. That's all the wiring's done for that. So we had to make some custom castings to hold the shafting, because this is not a typical way that really would have been done originally, but that's what we're going to do. And so there's a foundry in Auburn, Maine, that with a pattern that Joe Wist made up. They cast it, and Lee's husband David has been doing the machine work on the castings, and they're getting closer and closer to be ready to go. That's four-sided planer. These are box machines. They are for making the wooden boxes. Basically, they nail wooden boxes together of this type. I strongly suspect that this, because there's a lot of them around, and they all do not have labels, I suspect those are the boxes that the corned can was put in. So one of my first goals is to make a reproduction of one of those. But both of these machines have nailed. That one in particular took a lot of machine work. Joe Wist turned the shaft, which was badly worn, and then cast new batted bearings for it. So we've got that at least partially working. This one basically is fully functional. I haven't actually made a box with it yet, but this is some of the stuff that I've been doing. Part of the problem is getting the right chute. You've got to get the right thickness of materials and make it the right lengths. I'm working on that. That is going to be this is an old coal stove that we're converting to burn wood pellets. That came out of Chris Brown's house. Who was the original owner of that? Is that an England's house or I think? Okay, but it's one of the old names. This is, I think, perhaps the most magnificent thing that's in this hall. This is a stage curtain that was originally in the Denmark Community House. Before it was the Community House, it was the Grange Hall. And in about 1902, 1903, the Grange, which that's right when they started in Denmark, the Grange commissioned a studio in New York City to produce this. And they basically were given a snapshot of this image, and they made a grid, and they had a crew of 20 artists who transferred it to the larger size. The exterior is done with stencils and so forth, and actually we had to fold it back to fit it in this space. This is what it looked like when it was fully spread out.
Wow.
This is the roller that was on the bottom, so that gives you an idea of how wide it is when it's fully opened up. This is the ropes and mechanism. So basically, the roller was on the bottom and it would roll up like this. And it's not canvas with oil paint. It's very thin cotton, almost like sheeting material. And the paint is a water-based paint that is much more flexible than oil paint would be. So this was a phenomenon throughout northern New England during that time period of like basically 1880 through 1920, 1925 or 30. All the small towns, you didn't have television and all that stuff, so they would, for their public places, if they had a stage, they would commission one of these artist groups to produce these. One thing that's unusual about this is it does not have advertising. Usually, if you see the other ones, they have advertising of local businesses all around the outside. What happened in this case, I believe we've seen in some of our information, is that the members of the Grange pooled the money in together, so they didn't have to have that advertising. This was in pretty good shape, although it was covered with soot from, there was a coal stove in the original building. But there's a woman that actually has a business that seeks out documents and restores this type of curtain. And I contacted her, and she and her crew came, and with some volunteer help, we spread the whole thing upstairs, and it was all cleaned. And there was one woman artist who specifically painted in certain areas where the paint had faded or broken off. So, now, I don't know if you recognize what this image is of. It's basically it's basically from a point sort of on the stream right over there, looking up towards the dam. And this is the bridge, goes right across here. This is a flue that comes down to let logs go by. This is one of the mills, and this is, I guess, probably the prime mill, the Ingalls mill. And so these are some logs that have come down through the chute. And we're not quite sure what these sort of X things are up on the hill here. One of the fascinating things is this, which the woman that was helping us restore it said, well, why is there a cross there? It's not a cross. Right about that time, 1903, is when Denmark first got power and telephone. And so that's sort of documenting that. So this is like, the very old, early technology. This is the modern technology just coming in. And in fact, actually, the availability of power basically made the small water-powered mills obsolete within about 20 years. That was just sort of frustrating that came through. So these are pictures of, actually, this is a picture of the community house. Now, do people know where the community house is now? It belongs to the Monson family. The building, this is a very old picture because this shows it back when it was the Universalist Church. They were separate at the time, right? Universalist Church. When it became the Grange, the steeple was removed, and there's sort of columns here. That part was closed in. And where's our sign? There's the community house sign, which was on that. Both that sign and this curtain were very generous gifts of the Monson family.
Wow.
It was very, very generous of them. One thing that's kind of interesting here, these pieces of stuff, this was just found under the floorboards, or actually under the clapboards of the farmhouse. This is dates 1897. This is an ad in the Woodworker magazine, and this is a machine, different brand, but it's basically identical to this machine. And this is an ad for Doig box machines identical to those machines. So, I mean, that just shows that,
Very neat.
you know, they're definitely aware of all that stuff, and it was being marketed to them and so forth. That planer there is was made by H.H. or T.H. Ricker, big manufacturer of woodworking, industrial woodworking machinery up in Harrison. And again, doesn't have a specific relationship to Denmark, but it's of a type that would have been in like the Potter and Ordway cabinet shop. That was a big operation. They sold a lot of stuff out there. Part of the tour of the building, we don't have to go there, but that side of the wall is all new construction, and there's a bathroom there. There's a full basement under there which has the heating system, and also an elevator for handicap access to upstairs. So if we want to go around this way, we can. It's thanks to Don at the dock that we have this. This is the stamps for.
An old mail bag?
Yeah, this is an old mail bag, and I think Don saved this, but I'm not sure. So this was a mail delivery bag from the dump. And the other interesting thing is this was in the barn here. This is the fire bucket.
Fire brigade, yep.
Yep, because so it wouldn't be used for anything else. So
Yep, that's right.
totally useless except for and it's a fire only and Denmark Fire Department.
Wow, very cool.
And there's a story which I have to get Kenny to write down that has to do with how this equipment was originally purchased. This was from the building, which was a store, and previously it had a was it the Masons? Was it those? Yep. And but this was when I first moved to Denmark. This was a store in the first floor of that, the village store, and just a general store. Yes. And this was their cooler. This was originally a true ice box with this section here would have had just big blocks of ice. At some point later, it was converted to a compressor, and that's when they stuck the Frigidaire thing on it. And this was sold out of the building, and Mark Ragsdale and wife got it, and they used it in their home. They had a stereo system, and when after I bought this place, Mark said, you really ought to have this, and he didn't give it to me, but I said, yeah, I got to have that, and it's not going anywhere else. It was strictly by grunt labor it came in through that door. It was just as heavy as it looks.
Oh God, gotta be.
But that's just such a beautiful thing. We're starting to populate it with various old things, including this was a true find. Old Oxhead Ale, Standard Brewing Company, Rochester, New York. There's a little bit of it left down there on the bottom and capped. This was found in the bottom of the silo out in the barn. This dates to about 1935.
Wow.
So that's been aging really well.
Yeah.
Decided it was Pat Largy's brother, Sanborn, who remembered probably the exact same sled, and they did indeed drag it up Pickett Hill and come all the way down. It's missing the front truck, but I've got another truck that that's the same style, and so it just got to be put back together again.
Now, that would have the ability to turn.
Yes,
Yes,
right.
yeah. Like Bob's.
Yeah. This is separate from the historical. The Historical Society has made a firm decision long before I came on board that it did not want the responsibility, financial and otherwise, to have their own building. So they've worked out an amicable agreement with the library. That's where the archives are kept, and most of the time, that's where we actually have our meetings, is in that room downstairs. Both the Historical Society and Centennial Hall, I think, offer something to the community. Where Centennial Hall is hosted a number of Historical Society events, but we've done other things, one for the church. There's actually one coming up that my board doesn't even know about, is there's going to be a contra dance here on the 24th. And that's actually because the Art Center building is still without plumbing, and so they are forced to use a porta potty outside. So Susan approached me about the possibility of having it here, and I said, sure, I'd love to do that. And in fact, we are also working with Susan on a collaborative presentation that will be on the subject of stone walls. We have two people in mind, we've not approached them yet, but that do presentations on historic stone walls, and one or both of them may do an actual workshop. So Susan wants to get some stone wall work done around the Art Center building. But this would be in the fall sometime. And so basically, the Historical Society would welcome a contribution towards its operating expenses, which include rent to the library. We have office expenses and a bunch of other expenses. And as the sheet shows, we're taking on projects including digitizing our records, our archives and photographs and so forth, which is very expensive, but we do have sources that are helping towards that. We're also purchasing items that are important to the history of Denmark. There's been some recent purchases, including quilts and a journal from the 1860s by Dr. Gray, which is a very rare item, and I think reveals some more facts about the families of that time period. Astria, actually, her husband gets paid for that. So, can I answer any other questions?
In talking to you, we came up with the Historical Society, which is a very important part of town. It never asked for anything from the town. And I personally believe we should, as a committee, come up and request some type of funding. Because it's important to preserve the history of town. We're getting to be old. And my memory is very, cloudy. And I think, I think the board, I know I would support it, and I'm pretty sure a bunch of committees support it. So, just gotta come up with what you think you would like to start with, and give us a letter.
One of the things that we wanted to show was that we've been working collaboratively with the other nonprofits, and we'd like to talk to you about maybe some projects between the town and us, because we are everybody's archive, and I think people forget that we'd like to work with you about some of those type of things that maybe another time we can discuss, and I'm sure you might be thinking cap on for some things that maybe we haven't thought of. But we very much have been trying to work with every other organization in town too.
We put on an event for the church. It was related to the suffragette movement in the early 1900s.
We established an acquisition fund, which came out of the auction of ores, because nowadays, things come up on eBay or things come up at an auction, And you have to have a pot right there. You can't have a meeting and decide how much you can spend.
Yeah.
So we established that, and that's worked out. So.
Yes, I think that Astria and Lee were recently at an auction, and I think did quite well. And even some of the items that appeared to have been lost to other bidders ended up coming back. So that worked out well. And I think Lee and Astria sort of established a presence there in that auction community, so that they now know that Denmark is looking for items of interest to Denmark. So I think that may help too.
And we've been working on our archives for a number of years now, because I don't know if Winnie Moore kind of established. She was the Saturday volunteer at the library. And if you had anything about Denmark, you'd bring it to her. She had a box on a shelf at the library, and she'd put it in the box. So it might be pictures, a scrapbook, a document, an object. And for like 20 years, when she filled one box, she started another box, and then another box. So it sat that way for maybe 20 years. And so about 10 years ago, they started sorting. And one of the things that we've done is, if you look at our bylaw, or I can't remember the word, but we collect just Denmark. And for a long time, there was a lot of everything in there. So we have ourselves rehomed several things that don't pertain to Denmark. And, but our focus is Denmark. And we're finding things all the time. It's not just genealogy or papers or whatever, technology. There's just so many different things about our community that we've been trying to collect. And the digitization project has been going on for nearly a year now. And I just heard today that they have finished scanning all of the Denmark items that we've sent. And our intention is, in the next few months, we'll start seeing things. We're on the servers of Maine State Library, and they're a hub for the Northeast for, they call it Digital Maine, which is the digital public library. And so, like, say, if you put in like a person's name that was from Denmark, or Denmark, Maine, or something, that will come up on the internet, and whether it's a photograph or a document or a ledger, that will come up, and you can use it for, say, your family history, or if you're a researcher, there's some ledgers from the 1800s, early 1800s of different businesses, and you'll be able to view those ledgers. We also have some town in Denmark things, and you'll be able to view all those things.
So that would be where you'd find this digital, everything that's being scanned and digitized would be in this digital public library. Is there a specific website that you know?
You can go to Digital Public Library.
That's what it is?
Yeah. TPL.org. They have some things there now. What we'll probably start with is the collection of town reports.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know, the town of Denmark does not have a complete collection of its town reports. And there's nobody that has a complete collection. We start at 1860, and it's kind of incomplete. It's spotty and then 1900 onward we have a complete collection. And so those will come up first. Those will be the first things to come up. There's some interesting things in the town reports. Until a certain time, everything was put in the town reports. And as you know, everything was accounted to the penny. So if you're into the town charges, but also birth, death, marriages are all in there. It lists names and things. It's just, they're fascinating little piece of history. But we'll also, all our image collection, postcard collection, photographs, that'll be next. And I'll be working with Maine State Library to get them posted. And we have some great ledgers too that are interesting. One of the other things is with the schools, we had a school fire in the early 1920s, and everything that wasn't in private homes was lost. So every record about the schools is gone. And when we joined the school district, and I think it was in the late 1960s, everything that Denmark had collected to this point was sent up to the school district in Freiburg, and it was stored in the basement of the snow school. And this present-day superintendent is very intent on getting back the historical records that are not confidential to the towns. But before he came along, somebody did a clean out. So we went to pick up Denmark's records, and really thinking it was probably going to be a couple of truckloads of things or whatever. We received 6 ledgers. And what they are the records that didn't burn, the school board records that didn't burn in the fire in the 1920s. And those are the only things about our schools, present day and historical, that remain. So it was very upsetting.
Yeah.
Speaks a lot of digitized, such a...
Right. And it's right, very true, and that's another thing. And you can look at Dr. Gray's journal as an example. The older ledgers, it was natural inks. They're fading, and pretty soon you won't be able to read them. But with the digitization process, you'll be able to view them, and also you can darken, depending on you can darken the inks to make it readable, the page. And so that's the other part, is preserving our history of being able to use it 50, 100 years down the road. And the process that we're using with this company, the files will be viewable and won't need to be converted through the they view to the next 100 years. And then in that time period, when the new technology comes along, our files will be able to be converted into the newest technology that comes along. So it's kind of trying to be forward thinking.
Being shown in your brain. Exactly.
So we've been kind of, very much about, I think, both in our own different ways, but the three of us, about saving Denmark's history.
Another area that we've been doing some work in, and Austria is very interested in, is the cemeteries. And
Yes, very much.
so Lee has documented most, if not all, of the cemeteries, and Austria is interested in particularly assisting Kenny in restoration of some of the ones that have deteriorated and the ones that were damaged by the accidents and things like that. So we're not quite sure how that's going to work out, but that is definitely one of our interests. So the next step is ours, I guess, to present a application.
Yeah, just is what the most place issues a request for, usually what you would use, kind of what you would use it for, whether it's digital process or just to help, you don't have to be too specific.
Yeah, right. Mostly just a general,
Yeah.
here's what we're looking for, here's what we're gonna use it for, here's what we do, sort of a thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this won't actually appear in the town report, it's just for the selectmen's. Or
It would become a part of the warrant, it would be a warrant.
Oh, it would be.
To raise money, because the taxpayers have to approve it, or disapprove.
Okay, so the application letter.
No, just give a recommendation, boy, we have that.
But the letter becomes public.
Right.
Becomes a public record. I mean, it gets stored with the rest of them, it's public record for that year, but it doesn't, it's not in the report, it's not public.
I was just trying to figure out what.
Pretty simple, I mean, if you stop by the office and see what some people,
Right. Yep.
it's, try to put it correctly. It could be, we get one from a bad women's group, for instance, but they're over in Oxford. And we service your community this way, and we're requesting this much money. Just a very simple little formula. This is Denmark Historical Society.
Like Flight gets responses, we provide this many services in the past year.
Maybe how much money you spend, that always helps.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be real specific on it.
Okay.
Are we good?
I appreciate the tour.
Yeah.
I haven't asked